Hey everyone, this is Matthew Brown. Welcome to season 2 of the Undercurrent. Are you a high capacity person, mid capacity, or low capacity? I want to talk to you in this episode about new seasons and new capacities. You may have the capacity for a number of things, but you don't have the margin to get those things done. Join me for this episode as we unpack this on the Undercurrent. This is the Undercurrent. Welcome to season 2 of the Undercurrent. I'm Matthew Brown, and I am so delighted that you have supported us in season 1. Season 2 is going to be very bright. We're going to have guests as we move into this new season. You know, when we talked about the Undercurrent in our kickoff, we were really dealing with the whys of the what. We talked a lot about shifting. We've given capacity drills. We've given transparency drills. And so today, in this new season, I kind of want to talk about a new season. Well, clearly, you see what season it is. It's football season. Anyway, a lot of times when people talk about seasons, and because, again, I'm a pastor and I'm part of a very large religious denomination, and with around a lot of churchy people, and they all talk about this is my season, this is my moment. And it's interesting, if you look at seasons by the sort of creative narrative is really around how the earth changes and shifts in lieu or proximity of the sun. So there is winter, there is autumn, there's spring, and there is summer. And those seasons change based upon how the world is shifting, how the globe is shifting in its proximity to the sun. So the new season for us now is moving sort of into autumn, but it's football season. So there are these sub-seasons that accompany seasons, and everybody gets super excited. But I want to share with you that your season of life is more than a shift. It is how are we going to operate when the world turns away from the sun? Who are we when there are shifts that we cannot control, but we must participate in? And so in that context, now we need a new strategy. Yes, I realize that there are going to be seasons of difficulty, seasons of mourning. Matter of fact, there's a famous scripture in Ecclesiastes chapter 3 that talks about that there's a time and there's a season. I really believe that everyone has a season, they have a time within that season, and they have a turn within that time. Leonard Ravenel makes a great point. He says that the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of that opportunity. A lot of times we think that the opportunity of life is boom, but we fail to seize that opportunity in its lifetime because everything is seasonal. And so you may have to wonder and ask yourself very deeply, what season are you in your life? I'm not jokingly, but sort of trying to put it in a way that people can grab it. If scripture would suggest then that our lifespan is around 70 to 80 years, right? Then the question becomes, if you are 35, you are at halftime. If you're under 35, then you're in the first quarter. If you're 35, you're at halftime. If you are somewhere between 40 and 50, you're in the third quarter. And 60 and 70, that means you're in the fourth quarter. And if you're over 70, then you're in overtime. If you're over 80, then you got double time. But the point that I'm making is that you can't stop seasons. Now, if we can't stop seasons, then what do? We learn our own capacity. So we're going to talk about new seasons and new capacities. We've dealt with shifts. So we have shifted, we've figured it out, the undercurrent, we understand the why of the what. But now, what is my capacity? I'm really big on this right now because I really believe that a lot of us have various levels of capacity. And capacity is two things. Capacity is how much you can hold, and capacity is how much you can produce. So your capacity is not about how much you're carrying, but it also is how productive are you in the season that you're in? And so, in that context, we need to move from shifts to capacity and then start right where our plate may be full. Now, I'm going to deal with the full plate in a second, but I want you to think about how much bandwidth do you have? We talk about it all the time, well, I just don't have the bandwidth for that. No, you have the bandwidth for that. You have to measure between bandwidth and fullness. Bandwidth is that capacity, and a lot of times, bandwidth is our energy or our mental or emotional capacity to deal with things. Some people are by themselves. They live alone, they function alone because they don't necessarily have the bandwidth to deal with other people. And maybe because it is that level of frequency in which they operate. But then the other question is about how full is your bandwidth? You may have bandwidth, you may have the capacity to handle a couple of things, but it's just too full. And so as a result, it moves slowly. High capacity people are people that can juggle multiple projects, lead teams, juggle work, relationships, responsibilities, and still have time to serve others. I want you to identify whether you are a high capacity person. You may be a mid capacity person. You may be a low capacity person. And none of those things are wrong. It's just where you fit. Maybe the frustrations in our life comes not from necessarily the shifts. The opportunities of seasons arrive, but then we have to really think about capacity. How do you start right when you are so stretched? I'm glad you asked me that, because living with high capacity and limited margin is tough. You see, the tension between capacity and margin is simply this. I know I'm going to date myself, but here it goes. I grew up and I love this song. My Maserati does 185. Boom, 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 boom. I lost my license, so now I don't drive. Boom, boom, boom. I got a limo, I ride in the back. Boom, boom, boom. I lock the doors in case I'm attacked. Now, you're probably thinking I'm crazy, but I promise you I'm not. Listen, well, I'm not certifiable, but here's the point. I could drive a Maserati that may go to 180 miles an hour. That's the Maserati's capacity. But can I, on an empty freeway, man, it is flowing. But can I have the capacity without the margin? So do you take that same Maserati that has the capacity to go 180 miles an hour, but you put it in Atlanta traffic? Put it on the I-85, put it on the 285, right? And you're in the middle of traffic. You have the capacity to go, man, so fast, but you don't have the margin. Maybe in this new season with new capacity, I want to ask you, how's your margins? Because capacity is great, but capacity with limited margins, that becomes frustrating and could be a catastrophe. Margins give you the ability to rest, to reflect, to sit back, to pause, to be resilient, to be creative, while capacity continues to drive. And high capacity people, and I probably fit in that category as a high capacity person, we don't really understand our limits. We don't respect margins. High capacity people will keep piling it on until you hit burnout. I want to talk to you about that because, in all honesty, it's been that way for me. Moving at warp speed, managing multiple projects, running this, doing that, leading teams, and now necessarily, and then having pause, not having pause, or having measurements or boundaries to say, nope, you can't do that. And so I want you to begin to think about, if this is a new season, if the earth is shifting away from the sun and you find yourself in that space, then what is the capacity in the season? And not only is what is your capacity, what's your margin? You have to manage with what you can hold. You cannot manage anything that makes you feel overwhelmed. And you have to make sure that you respect the margins of your capacity. You may have bandwidth, but it's full. I like Stephen Covey's priority quadrants. Matter of fact, I lead my teams and we talk about it all the time. You know, what is urgent and important? What's urgent but not important? What's important but not urgent? What's not important and not urgent? Maybe you need to draw a capacity map with Stephen Covey's quadrants of priorities. If you'll do that, then all of a sudden you'll start taking your schedule and all the things that everyone is asking you to do, and you will put them in quadrants so that you will understand that you're not responsible for responding to every request that is made of you. Because let me say something to you. If you're high capacity, if you're mid capacity, if you're low capacity, then, but particularly high capacity, you will feel an obligation to get all of your ticklers done. But if you put it in a capacity map with Stephen Covey's quadrants, then what you will learn is that you are not obliged to do it all, but to make sure that you do what's urgent and necessary. So let's create a capacity map. Let's try that as we walk into a new season. It's going to be a new season for the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be a new season for the NFL. It's going to be a new season for your life. It's going to be a new season for your work life. You may be in between seasons. How's your capacity and margin to manage it all? I'm so glad that we have a time to talk about what's full and only managing what I have, taking a look at what's not necessary and using the quadrants to make a full life so that you are productive, you are holding what you produce, and you're happy at the end of it. This is the Undercurrent. Hey everyone, I want to say thank you for joining us for Season 2, Episode 1 of New Seasons and New Capacities. Let me invite you to go to the website at matthewlbrown.org. You're going to find a number of free offerings that will assist you as we deal with the undercurrent. And then my special personal invitation for September 25th is going to be our first live webinar as we align for what's next. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, looking forward to conversing and unpacking Season 2.